Welcome everybody again to another exciting meeting of MicroGiants, and today we're going to talk about a subject that is really key to all businesses, and that's customer service in particular. And the reason, we're going into the planning phase after we went through the entire marketing cycle planning process 2 weeks ago. And then we come back around to customers, and we've already gone through some of the customer analysis stuff that we've done, and we've got a video on that. But because the Wall Street Journal did a full insert on customer service, and they pulled up some new information on kind of some of the background that's from a recent survey that was done by a consulting group, Perspectives on Psychological Science. So, the psychology group, pretty good size survey, and picked up by the Wall Street Journal. So I thought that the numbers were good. They're not terribly different from other numbers that I've had in the past. But the interesting thing is that this is post-COVID. And so I thought it would be pretty interesting just to kind of pick this up and have a conversation about customer service. I don't think we've ever had one before, so I kind of thought that's what we would do here. So you all know that I've used this whenever customers are around, and Peter Drucker was, even though it was in our backyard, and they named a school after him at Claremont, the Drucker School of Business. And so, and I also have a really good friend who's a professor who studied with Drucker, so I get, whenever we have coffee, every 4 or 5 months or so, we talk about Drucker. And this is a quote, and he has many, but this is a quote I really like, and that is, "The purpose of business is to create and keep a customer, and then everything else is really just a cost." A lot of times we tend to focus on other things in business as if that's the reason you're in business. But in fact, of course, if you can't create a customer, and of course keep them longer term, hopefully. Some businesses it's just a one-time customer, but for the most part, you want to keep them. Then you're just kind of wasting your time, really. So that's what makes these numbers so important. So basically, what we have is a really large number that pops up, having to do with households. Whoops, excuse me. Well, maybe it doesn't. There we go. I'm sorry. Basically, they find that 66%, 2/3 of all households have experienced an issue with the product or service just in the last year. So that's 2/3. Whoops, sorry about that. That's a big number. In other words, most of the time, somebody has a problem at least once a year. Now, of course, there are different levels of problems, from a little teeny something that you might buy. I have bought a whole lot of watering system things, irrigation stuff recently. And occasionally there's a little bit of a problem, not very often. Normally the problems I run into is when it gets very complicated, the directions are really obtuse and not very good. That would be a problem. But then you might also have a problem where you buy a refrigerator and it only works 6 months, and you spent $1,500, $2,000 or more nowadays on a refrigerator. Now that's a big problem. So, but it's a little bit of a high number, it seems to me. And then if we push just a little further, we see that 65% of those people experience customer rage. Now, this really blows my mind. So you're saying 2/3 of 2/3, about half, have experienced rage. And that, I guess, rage might be in the eye of the beholder. I don't know, but I'm not sure. I'm just surprised anybody would admit that they were enraged. It's like, okay, you're upset, you're not happy, but you were enraged. So that just kind of blows me away that a number would be so big. And then of those, 72% submitted a complaint. So the ones who were enraged, 72% wanted to do something about it. 16% of those posted a public comment. So now we're starting to go, okay, we've got half of the customers are mad. Three-quarters of those people, a little less than half now, are upset enough to post something about it, or upset enough to do a complaint. Only 16% of those, so now we're down to maybe 10%, said that they're actually posted public comment. And then you kind of go, well, that's not so bad. Maybe we could afford that. Well, no, you can't afford that. And of course, the reason why is by the way, and 58% got no response at all. So that's pretty bad. No wonder they posted a comment. So what you end up with is that, they tell 9.4 people. Now, in the olden days, the number we used to hear was they told 5 people. So there's a 5-to-1 ratio. But now we're talking a 1-to-10 ratio, almost, not quite. So that's pretty big deal. You got 10 customers. You got a customer who tells 10 other people who are would-be customers they're upset. But then here's what really blows the mind. The average number of friends or followers on social media that saw the complaint was 865. So it's 865 to 1. That's something every owner about now ought to be getting pretty concerned with. That's a big, big number. The point here is that this is really a big deal. And the way that we used to handle things in private between a business owner and a customer, or between say frontline workers in retail and a customer, used to be, it just went to those 5 people, now maybe 10 people, but now we're talking 865 people on average. If it's an influencer, you may be having someone tell, that may go to 10,000 people. You don't really know how many people saw it, but the average was 865. So, as I was looking through this and reading this article and mulling it around, I thought, this is interesting, updated information. This really means something now. And it used to be that customer-facing companies like retailers kind of had this problem, but B2B didn't really have the problem. It's like, well, if you don't like it, you probably don't know anybody in our industry, and if you told anybody, it wouldn't hurt us anyway. Well, not true anymore. Now B2B has just as much of an issue as everybody else does. So chances that they would be in that industry and be, say, a buyer of other commercial goods might be small, but still you can see people will see that. And those people, of course, per person spend a whole lot more than a consumer does. So this is very much a kind of an effective issue. This happens to be 90 times the word of mouth. So there's the impact that actually has. So I just drew this real fast little symbol showing that, we're talking about, 2/3 and 2/3 of 2/3. It gets down to a fairly small slot, but man, when they get that megaphone, it just explodes. So what do we do? Well, let's try and discuss the reasons. The article was all about COVID. And I really doubt that that's just the only cause. I'm sure that people have gotten a little bit more upset with each other and with businesses as a whole when they can't, as things have kind of impacted the business. But I noticed this in 2019. And I can remember very specifically, this happened to be travel, so we can blame the leisure industry and the travel industry on these things. But went back east in 19, and the customer service was so notably poor, I mentioned it to my wife. And I just said, you noticed really how bad it is, how bad the stewards on the plane were bad. They just didn't pay any attention. They didn't have time. They didn't smile. And it was Southwest. So these are the people who are known for peanuts and being jolly and telling jokes. And boy, I tell you, it was somber. It was like somebody died. Then we get into the rental car. We got the same kind of a problem. We stay in a couple of hotels because we're driving up the coast, and the service at the front desk was just horrid. You might be standing in a line and nobody even says, gee, we're sorry you're standing in a line. They don't even acknowledge that you've got an issue. They don't acknowledge that maybe it was hard, for them to even find you and get in there. I mean, here you are, a weary traveler. And, the way that hospitality has really made it work over the years is by understanding the circumstance of the customer and alleviating those issues right away. So I doubt seriously that the problems that we have are based just on consumers being tired because of COVID. Although we know there are a lot of psychological issues that have come up, and we could talk more about that. I think number two, labor is perhaps a bigger issue. We were at full employment in 2019. The service was decidedly bad. In two cases, one of them had said, this was an older person, probably 60 years old, and he had, kind of was fumbling around a little bit, and then somebody kind of looked at me as I'm kind of going, I guess it showed in my face, said, oh, well, yeah, he's new, he doesn't really know. So I'm thinking, okay, here's a guy who looks seasoned. And as I walk up to him, I'm thinking, great, I've got somebody who knows what they're doing. And lo and behold, this guy was coming back to work because it's full employment. He had been out of work for some time, and he had no idea what he was doing. And he certainly did not know how to be hospitable. He was kind of an old crotchety guy, and he really lived up to sort of that stereotype, He wasn't going to put up with any damn customers that didn't fit into the right slot. And so that was our greeting there. And then we had the same kind of lack of sensitivity. So this was a training issue. That's, my thought was we got a training issue. I mean, and we began talking with clients about this. It's like, you get new people, this is full employment, you got to be really careful to get them trained so they know how to act, because there's a lot of problems here. Is the quality of merchandise lower? I don't think so. Yes, I've run into issues with a few products, and because we're in a new house, I bought a lot more stuff recently just, to get the move done. And I don't find that there, has been any change there. I don't think quality is the issue. But we certainly all have been blaming supply chain and delivery. I don't think there's any question that supply chain and delivery is part of the strain. And it happens not, the customers are expected to be able to buy something. I've changed my habits. I rarely go to Lowe's or Home Depot anymore because they've reduced their inventory by probably 20, 30%. And then they're out of stock on some things. And so they're on some items down 30%. The number of different types of parts, for instance, for home irrigation systems, the number is at least 50% of what it used to be. You can't find what you want. So what do? They're really asking you to go online. Now, my response, just as a regular customer, is I'm not going to go onto Home Depot. I'm not going to reward them. I'm going to go onto Amazon. They're better. They're faster. They're not always cheaper. But, these are inexpensive parts. I really need them. I already spent the time to go to the store. I need them. I want the reliability of Amazon delivering that. Are they out of stock? Sure. But they tell you, and then they tell you how long it's going to be. Then they have alternatives for you. The people in Home Depot, even though they're people, don't even do that. They are busy enough restocking and doing whatever it is that they do, and maybe they're understaffed. That's really I'm sure they're partially understaffed. But instead of helping you fix the problem, which is why you're in the store, they say, sorry, we're out. And in and I'm not exaggerating, in at least 10 cases over the last 3 or 4 years, I have said, well, I've kind of noticed that your inventory seems a little bit lower. In every case, oh yeah, we just don't have as much inventory as we used to. And this was happening before COVID. This was happening because of Amazon, them trying to figure out how to respond in this new world. They haven't figured out what to do with the old-fashioned customer who walks in with money in their pocket. And so they're not solving their problems anymore, and they're not suggesting very often, they're not suggesting alternative ways of fixing the problem or alternative products. So the supply chain is certainly part of this, but the lack of experience, the lack of training, or maybe the other side of this is when you get to the bottom of the barrel and you're hiring people who are the last 3%, that they're just not as good and they don't care. And therefore you have a lower quality of workforce. So I'm suggesting that there's a real possibility that, and in my lifetime, we've never run into this potential problem. And that is when you have higher than full employment, say, in other words, unemployment at less than 4%. It may well be that you're getting the bottom part of the workforce, and they're just never going to be as good because no amount of training will help them care about doing a better job, and so that may be part of the problem. So those are some of the reasons. There are probably more, and we can talk some more about that. So what do you do about that? Well, the article was really talking about enraged customers, and be sure to keep them from getting really, really upset. And therefore, you need to have empathy, and you need to say the right thing at the right time, etc. That's all. I think that's all true. And as an argument, as a guide for very angry people, I think that there's value in that article. And basically they're saying handle the complaints from the customer's point of view with some empathy, and others understand them. What I'm basically saying is that if the customer is upset, they're probably right. And therefore the employee needs to say, okay, if I were in the same position, I'd be upset too. If you're trying to get on the plane and you show up an hour and a half, 2 hours early, and there's still a huge line, and you have to change your ticket or get your baggage checked, and the line goes slowly, and you use up 40 minutes or longer, and then there's a line to go through security, you're probably not going to be too happy about that. So you've got an issue, and people have to begin to deal with it. Now, the frontline people, unfortunately, this stuff really rolls right into their lap, and they have to deal with it, even though they, in many cases, can't do anything about it. Are they empowered to not charge you for your bag? I don't really know, but I haven't heard that that's been a remedy. Are they empowered to give you your money back? No, not really. If you miss the plane, will they give you a hotel stay? Answer, no. But strangely enough, I've been around long enough to know that was common practice. If they canceled a flight and you were going to have to go the next day, you got a free hotel room. So service has actually come down here. So you want to try to provide real and honest correction or compensation. The airlines clearly cannot and do not try and do that. They're more policemen now, and by reducing the size of the seats, reducing the quality of the people, reducing the meals, all the things we used to have that made an airline flight really fun have completely been eliminated. At the same time, the price has not gone up in real terms. So what we're getting now is very, very low cost fares and very, very low cost service. Yes, people get upset about that. They haven't done a very good job at evaluating and providing an alternative. And many other businesses have not either. And so the leadership has to provide the ability for real and honest correction and compensation and empower their people to do it in order to fix that problem. Be sure and record all the issues and correct them very quickly if possible by record for small businesses here. You may find that you fixed a problem. Say you're in a restaurant and somebody got what they thought was the wrong meal, and you just say, "Oh, I'll bring it right back." And restaurants are good at that. Yes, take this. They can do that partially because their cost, only about a third of their cost is the cost of the merchandise of the food. So their costs are not the same as other kinds of businesses, but it's very common to solve a problem that way. And you certainly don't want them to say, "I'm never going back to that place again," because you gave them the wrong thing or they didn't like something. So they're pretty good about that. And for the most part, I'd say waiters are doing a pretty good job under the circumstances. There are other issues that they could, but they're not necessarily recording all of those issues so that the owners can, in fact, go back to number 2 and provide real and honest correction or compensation. The problem is they're not recording it at all. And they're just sort of kind of picking it up. Maybe they empower their people. Maybe they handle it at the cash register. But they're not keeping track of that. And that's something for Edgar to really think about in terms of his systems, is that how can you empower your clients within systems to be able to keep track of pieces of that, if not all of the issues that come up. And you want to build systems that prevent these kinds of repeat occurrences. That sounds like an easy thing to do. It's a really hard thing to do. Requires mostly technology today, but there are also manual systems that can do some of these things. For instance, you could just have a register, a paper register, when somebody is upset, and quickly write it down, put who the server was, what you did to remedy it, and whether or not you solved the problem or not. So, that would be a start. But small businesses don't even think of keeping track of all of the problems. It reminds them of how bad they are. And so, but it's important. It's really important. And really, it's the only way for management to have any idea what to do, what to work on, and where to invest money. You want to also hire the appropriate customer-facing people. Now, we've talked about hiring several times and hiring systems. The 3 consulting amigos have done several programs, which we have posted on the MicroGiants YouTube channel, and it really illustrates, those particular programs talk about the issues having to do with personnel and how to manage that. John Mills has done a lot of that, and we might want to bring that up and talk more about that. But when we have less than adequate people, they need to be screened harder and they need to be trained more. So that's try to hire appropriate customer-facing people, and as John will tell you, the right kinds of personalities are important to deal with the public. And then if you can get all of this stuff done, try to request social posting so that maybe you'll get a good comment to mitigate all of those 865 other comments that are bad. And so, which, as you, I think you all know, Yelp and many others will simply weed you out of the top of a listing if you have bad reviews. So this is a really big deal. So that's pretty much it. Let's kind of open it up and see where you guys would kind of like to take this discussion. It's a huge, big subject. I will never cover everything, but there are a lot of issues. So let me just start by asking, how many of you would say that you've had the same kinds of experiences in the last, say, 3 years, and are they getting better or worse?
I think I have, Ron. both as an e-commerce consumer and as a traveler. Um, it does seem that maybe tech interruption perhaps hasn't helped in terms of the customer service experience. In fact, I think consistently tech interruption kind of falls short. I think maybe Amazon is probably the exception that proves the rule in my mind. But I've rented an apartment in the past from a tech startup that did rentals that frankly just didn't understand how to be a landlord, but they thought slap an app on it and we'll do better than the competition.
Right. That's a good phrase.
But then when
slap an app on it, right?
I mean, like everything worked well until they had to figure out how to fix a leaky faucet.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it does seem like, actually we had just this issue with lawn watering equipment that we ordered first through Amazon, but like through a third-party vendor. And there were such huge supply chain shortages, and of course inflation became a problem, that when it came down to replacing the equipment we ordered, it took us almost a year to rectify this. It only happened a week ago, and then they were really reticent to actually give us a new model because it was so much more expensive than it was at the start. So I guess it is sort of an empowerment issue, but I mean that empowerment is powerful because, like, for instance, I flew Delta Airlines one time, and they needed extra seats on a flight, and they were giving out $1,000 of reward of flight miles, and so
they were oversold. Yeah.
Yes. So I mean, like I feel like it is powerful when the front line does have that empowerment to make sort of a relationship and to customize the experience for a customer. But you're right, it does seem so rare anymore.
Yeah, well, and I think that's a terrific example of what the airlines have tried to do to fix a problem. However, the problem that they're fixing is not that they've done anybody wrong. The problem they're fixing is what they always do wrong, and that is they always oversell a flight. So, when this becomes policy and they intentionally oversell, now, of course, they're trying to be efficient. They want to sell all the seats, and therefore they know how many seats they can oversell and how many people don't show up and how many people are late and that kind of thing. So they're putting a statistical model on it to determine, well, okay, how many people do we get bumped and that sort of thing. But for that one person who, bought their plane ticket, selected their seat, expected to be able to walk on the plane, was there 3 minutes before the door is supposed to close and somebody else has their seat now, there's almost nothing that you can do for that particular person. It's sort of like, sorry. And what's happened there is that the airlines have broken trust between the customer and them. And they've broken trust because they don't have ongoing schedules anymore. They have not figured out how to schedule a pilot. You hear, well, they had to cancel. We haven't even gone anywhere this year. We've already had the 2 flights that we have planned changed already. And so how many more times will it change? Will it be a last minute change like it was a year and a half ago when we flew, where we had to get a whole new flight at the very last minute, and it was just crazy, and it was really a horrible experience. And I think the trust that I would suggest that airlines have is, look, figure out what your price is and bring people in. And if you promise that you're going to have a flight, promise that. You can't tell me that you're going to have the number of cancellations that you're having now because your pilot was sick. I just can't accept that. Yes, pilots get sick, but what actually happens is they're doing late minute scheduling so that they can get as many pilots on as many planes as they possibly can. They've got efficiency experts doing algorithms, trying to do all of this fancy balancing as if they're a manufacturing operation, trying to keep all of the air out of the system. The problem is they're hurting people. It's not like a few extra parts fell on the floor and they broke. No, somebody's life was changed. So hospitals do that too. I mean, they're having scheduling problems like crazy, and if they're, there is as much of a problem trying to schedule appointments with doctors as happened to Edgar today. That happened to me last week. It happened to my wife 3 times in a row. Last minute, we got a call, got to reschedule. And do they reschedule for next week? No, they reschedule 3 weeks from now or 6 months from now. See, so it's sort of like, where's the trust here? We know that you want to try to take care of as many people as possible. Greatly appreciate that. But some of us actually have other things to do as well. The whole world does not revolve around the doctor. And in many cases, you can't even see the doctor. You got to see the PA now or the nurse now. So they've lowered the standard of service and they've lowered the accessibility. But that's the hospital industry. You can't even compare that with normal economic system, because it doesn't exist anymore, like supply and demand, which is supposed to solve many of these problems. And eventually, I think it will. Anybody else experience some of this stuff?
Yeah, I think most of us have, and it's interesting that in the last couple of years, airlines are one of the things. Like I've flown, because I go to New Zealand quite often. I've flown with Air New Zealand, and in Air New Zealand, it's like a full service airline. So you get silverware, you get crockery and plates, you get glasses, and they take care of you. And so,
and it's a full price airline too.
It's a full price. It's the only one kind of really used to be one of the very few going down to New Zealand, and it was underwritten in part by the government. So you got, really nice things. And then I've also flown remotely where I've used, for example, Spirit, which I'll never do again, as long as I can, because it is absolutely not. Now, you go Spirit because it's a price buy, and you say, hey, I've got to save money and I'm going to go with a low price. Now, and I would argue with you that customer service at the two ends of the spectrum are a little different. There's kind of an expectation when you go with an Air New Zealand or a KLM that you're going to be taken care of. And there's all these soft expectations. And the hard expectation is you'll get from A to B. And the soft expectation is if you have a peculiar need or a want, it'll get taken care of. And somebody will say, oh, please, how can I help you? Would you like some, chutney with your toast? I understand that may be nice. And so you get treated well. With Spirit, there's the expectation that you kind of on your own and you're going to go there. So there's in a peculiar way, there's a less need for as finessed customer service, and indeed, probably for good reason, because you're probably not going to get it. So I would like to say that there's two different styles out there, hardcore, and that depending on what your business is, if you have an interactive business that has some soft expectations, then I think you've got to build into that a people factor that takes into account people who can address those soft expectations. And the training level goes up exponentially for those people. I'm going to cite one that I think most people would be aware of, but in the accommodation area, Marriott had a reputation for excellence in the experience. And at Marriott, they had trained and they went through and picked people for their front court, their courtyard, their concierge, and they meet a specific set of personality profiles. And part of that profile was to be able to handle a big diversity of issues and keep things very calm and open, and try to present the ability to be accommodating, even though they might go through the door to the back office and say, would you believe what this guy's wanting? But they go out and they present in a very caring way. And in fact, they try to go out of their way to offer it. And so that personality profile is really a different one than the guy who's going through transactional processes.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And it makes me wonder if some of them are not actually hiring to those profiles. You know, if you're going to be the service one, maybe you really do go out of your way to get.
Well, yeah, to your point,
Yeah.
Ron, that today, quite often people just want a warm body to answer the phones.
Mhm.
And they get somebody who is an engineering based, very detailed, by the book person who is now answering the phone with people who have got they're a little upset about something, or they want, and it's like, wait a minute, I'm not really skilled for doing that. Give me the facts. Let me. So, but we're hiring the warm body because basically that's all we've got.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I just want to point out, I think everything you said is accurate. I want to point out that in the case though, where you might be Spirit, and I'm not saying Spirit specifically, but if you are the sort of low cost provider and therefore the customer may have lower expectations, is that not a potential differentiator for you? Is that not an opportunity? How much would it cost to take your regular people, change around some of your policies, procedures, mostly procedural stuff, and create better service from the same people simply because you care and you do the training? How much does the training of, say, one person in front of 30 people a week or a day, how much did that really cost you more than, say, more per hour for all of those employees? So what a terrific way to differentiate yourself. That's exactly what low-cost carrier Southwest did, and that's why they let it be. They were the first one to kind of break with the uniforms and wear the shorts and start having fun and doing kind of a whole different genre. They created a whole business. That's not who they are today. They're no longer that. They might throw a joke one way or the other from time to time. But boy, I'll tell you, their service is just as bad in my mind as anywhere else, not to mention having to wait in the cattle line in order to get on the plane. So they've really misstepped, in my opinion, lately, but they in fact gave away their differentiator. It's a good, interesting model to look at, especially when you're looking at the value diamond. And then you realize that somebody's got lower service. How can we create a more competitive product by increasing the service at not very much cost? And so it's a perfect example to be able to go the other direction. I think a lot of small businesses today are not thinking about how can we actually improve during these rough times, as opposed to, well, that's the best employee we could get, or we can't help, it's a supply problem, we just can't help it. Well, think outside of the box, be innovative, try to do something a little different and do a better job at it. Ed, how about you?
Well, I want to amplify on Southwest. Last year, we went on 2 trips, one with Southwest and one with Hawaiian Airlines. And Southwest was the most dissatisfying trip I've had probably in my whole life.
Yeah, wow.
There was a constant battering going on between the people on the plane that running the plane and the customers over COVID.
Oh,
it was hostile.
Oh my, yeah.
And they would they come up with these general announcements on the plane, belittling people. These are their customers.
Yeah.
And I actually got off the plane and said, I'm never flying Southwest again. And I do get irritated with the cattle car waiting in line, and then also all the upcharges that go on so they can get a spot in line. Because right now you can call in right on time and you're probably no better than a B halfway through the B's.
Right.
You used to be able to get A's, right?
Right.
And so it's one thing after another. The stewardesses, they didn't smile. They just, I was an inconvenience to them on the plane. Hawaiian Airline was just the opposite. COVID was going on probably more intense in Hawaii than the States. And their stewardess were so nice, always had a smile. You ring the bell, they were there to help you. There wasn't this horrible or this antagonizing feeling between the stewardesses and the people flying on the plane. It was a very pleasurable experience, and the fares were relatively the same. So
Yeah.
I don't see price as being a differentiating factor anymore. It is what it is. You get on a plane and you go, and this is the cost. So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
that's a good point. I did want to ask you though, related to finding out how much your customers like you. What's your opinion of testimonials that you get from customers? Because a lot of businesses that I deal with, they really appreciate testimonials from customers.
I think that they're almost critical in today's economy. The way that consumers evaluate who they're going to do business because of the online social issues. So I think it's very important. Third-party testimonials are valuable because the consumer tends to think that they are non-biased. And so, I can do a testimonial for you and, you can do one for me. But, the connections may be too close. And so it's a whole lot better if somebody that you don't know is, saying, yeah, that Ed Lasik is a really, really, good financial guy. And I was really happy with what he did for us. That really means something. So I think it's very important. And the last point, of course, in the presentation was, see if you can't get them to post something. Now, you don't want to get too overt about that. People, you don't want to put the monkey on their back and make them feel as though they got to do this because they sort of promised they would. But you do want to suggest it in such a way as, if they happen to think of you and they're on social media, they might mention it and might say something nice, and you can get a lot of good things. The other way to do that is through direct surveys, and using something like SurveyMonkey is really easy today. And while the responses are going down, I saw a tweet the other day from an old friend, and he said, "Please, can you stop sending out surveys?" And he had like 50 or 60 comments, all agreeing with him. So, maybe it's a little bit overdone. For those customers that you have a relationship with, if you have a business that requires relationships or, benefits from relationships, those people will tend to fare just a little bit better and go out of their way and not feel put out as much to be able to write something about you. The second way to try to do that is when someone says something really nice to you about that, you just go, wow, that's really great. I really appreciate that. Would you mind if I just wrote that down and had you check it for, as a testimonial? And then immediately you write it down as exact as you can, what they said, and you send them an email and you said, just wanted to make sure this is what you said about me or our company. Is this correct? And people will, 9 times out of 10, they'll go, oh yeah, that's exactly what I said. Sure, no problem. Be happy to have you use it. Don't use my name, or just use my initials, or yeah, you can use my name too. So you have to spend a little extra time and effort to do it. I think the payback is incredible, and you can use those for many years.
Yeah, I think some people just don't want to spend the time going through another survey. But I like your approach. If they say something positive to you, write it down, get back to them, and then post it after they get their confirmation. You're doing all the work.
Yeah.
And that would probably improve the results, improve the frequency, how many you get back, right?
Yeah, well, yeah. And actually, we've done this many, many, many times for clients. I don't recall ever having a rejection. I don't think we've ever gotten a rejection when somebody said, "Oh no, I didn't say that," or they might change 1 or 2 words, but for the most part, that's the way they do it. But when you have a regular survey and you send them out, you'll find that people will, if you're doing a good job, people will give you a little bit of a referral there simply under the comments section. We did one recently for the dairy It was a large number. I think we sent out about 20,000 of them, got back a very low percentage compared to normal. It was about 12%. We're used to getting between 15 and 30%, but see, there are too many
12%
surveys.
is good.
Too many surveys, and so that's going down as well. But I would estimate that we got 200 or 300 really, really good testimonials. So now it's just a matter of picking the ones that have a diversity of thought and look at different aspects of the business. So, I mean, if you have a customer feedback system that is really working, this is just one of the things that spins off of that, is you get the customer testimonials. That's part of the communication with the client. That's part of the feedback. And of course, it ties into, you got to keep track of the people that you piss off. You have to try and rectify those. You can't do them all. But so many times you can put people, not only make them happy, and the article mentioned this, you can put them back on your side and say, wow, I had a real problem, and these people bent over backwards to fix it, and that's unusual, and I am now on their side of the ledger again. So fixing a problem is way more important even than, say, the next customer that doesn't have a problem. I mean, you have to fix those problems. Now, this really raises the standards a lot. Quality has to be better. Service has to be better. Your accuracy behind the counter, so to speak, in the back office has to be right. You've got to be able to bill them the right amount, not make mistakes on their taxes or whatever the case may be. It just have to be right. It just means you have to raise the standard of excellence on everything. What is happening, of course, is that because of all these systems and the social side, the ones who get weeded out faster than before. They have, in order to stay in business without this social aspect today, you have to be in an industry where there just aren't enough people to do the work. Something like a plumber, and I'm having trouble, finding septic service people. It's like nobody wants to do it, and they get paid really well. So I guess they don't have to have good customer service because I can't find anybody to come. Kristen, did you want to jump in at all? What kind of problems are you guys running into?
Yeah, so we have implemented surveys for clients and us doing servicing and doing industrial cleaning for a lot of the people who call us from these different manufacturers or industrial sites. I conducted a survey that has probably like 4 questions, I believe, because we kind of try to put our perspectives into the perspective of that position who's contracting us. What are they looking for? What do they need? And kind of creating the questions from there. I talked with my project manager, my father, and for those people, what's important is that 1, we get there on time. 2, we can actually complete the project. 3, when we leave a clean area. And then the 4th question, I believe, is just any comments or anything that they want to put in there, an extra. And through that process there of the surveys, I mean, I want to say it's in the early stage of it, but at the same time, it does give us an idea of what the client is looking for. So far, the surveys have been good. So apparently our quality of work has been pretty great. The servicing we provide is pretty great. So in regards to the clients, we don't really see that much trouble, but I do like what you're pointing out in the presentation of whenever there is a complaint that we make sure that we record it and make sure that once we record it that we provide some solution so that doesn't happen again. Because I know we've gotten some complaints here and there, not so much, very little, but when they are, we don't have a system to record it and to follow up on it and to make sure that whatever was complained about, that it was situated and solved for. So that's something I'm going to implement right away. That's what I do like, is that we make sure we don't leave anything out. For us, I want to say it's more internally customer service. From the managers, supervisors, and making sure that the customer service internally with like my employees or a supervisor's team, my project manager, and making sure that whoever's under him, whoever he's managing, that he provides a certain customer service or to them, which is an employee service, of providing good support or making sure that whatever they need or whatever the difficulties or problems or challenges that they have, that we make sure that we're following up on them and making sure that we're helping them solve those challenges. So for us, it's more internally right now. What it looks like is that we're trying to situate and make sure we don't leave anything behind. Like if an employee complains about something, that we make sure we follow up with that complaint and make sure that it doesn't go off, because we've seen that because of the pandemic or what the pandemic and a lot of things with inflation as well, that it's put a lot of pressure on employees.
Yes.
Where their trigger points are more smaller. Like they'll get heated quicker, they'll blow a fuse quicker. We had a driver who quit on site where we had no problems with him whatsoever. His whole time with us, one decision he did not like and he quit. So that was pretty surprisingly. But so for us, more internally and making sure that we take care of the employees and making sure that we're doing that customer service follow-up is what you mentioned, but with our staff instead. Of course, not leaving the client, but it's morely our staff is what we're looking that we need to take care of.
Yeah, well, those are all really excellent points. I really like your comment that you just made about, the stress. There is that. And, be sure, and we all have to be sure that we're doing a little bit more to be sure to care for employees. They treat their customers the way you treat them in some cases. So, and you want to do extra things for them, recognize that things are a little more stressful, a little tougher. And so, oh, by the way, we're going to bring pizza in just to have fun for a few minutes, let your hair down, and maybe, even a few beers, depending on who, your employees and what they want to do and how they want to do that. But do stuff that they find is sociable and fun, or rewarding to them, which, yes, a raise, but even, a bonus might even be more effective, and let them know that you appreciate the fact that they're having to step out and, hold a little more weight than they're used to. People will tend to respond, when you treat them that way. And I'm really pleased to hear that you're doing the survey. And I just kind of want to remind you, we've been through this before, but remind you to be sure and keep the results of those survey so that you can compare that to the next time you do the survey. And, many times if they come back and they go, wow, everybody loves us, we got a 99% satisfaction rate on service or whatever. Well, great. But when that drops 2 or 3 percentage points, 3 years from now, you'll know something needs to be worked at. And likely you've got a single employee that's just going to drop their persona a little bit. And as a result, they've made 1 or 2 people mad. And that's how you can find that out. You probably all remember the story about the dairy. Well, JP, you probably don't know this. At the dairy, we have 8 customer service people. And we have measured this now going from every way we could think of, going on, I think this is about our 23rd year. And we don't do it every year, we do it a big survey every 3 years. But things are going along good. Customer service is rated higher and higher and higher, and we're working on it. And all of a sudden there was a little notch down. And because of the olden days, we couldn't do this because we were using spreadsheets, but now we just go through and we sort through the 2 or 3 people there, and we find out how they answered every single question on SurveyMonkey. And you can dig in and you can find out these people have problems, and they don't show up in the statistics. But when you separate them out, it's like, wow, we've got some people who are really mad. Using that to dig in, they were able to find the 1 person out of the 8 who was causing those problems. And that person came on in between the great survey the last time and when we had done this survey. They identified that and they fired him. The next time, I mean, they got more specifics. They didn't just pick a supplier. They got more specific, and they got, they did an internal 360 survey and so forth. Well, the next time we did the survey, guess what? It was higher than it ever had been before. So this was a problem that because of the survey, we found it and we fixed it before it ever got completely out of hand. And it might have. The big fear is that the other 7 see that she's not working as hard as they are, and then they start slipping. And now you've got 2 or 3 others that are not as good as they used to be. Not quite taking that extra step to get the customer taken care of. And so the long-term review can provide information way beyond what you'd ever imagine. So just be sure and keep that data and keep comparing it to the old survey.
Ron, as a segue to another show you may want to talk about down the road is some customers you have to fire.
Yeah.
And sometimes
before they get mad, right?
Well, somehow you don't want to, there's certain people you just can't seem to satisfy, and you spend more money on them than the rest of your customers. And a lot of times you're losing money on those customers.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to make a conscious decision. Are you planning to service them in the future or not? And I think sometimes every customer is the same, and I don't think that's the case. I think they're all somewhat different, and maybe you can categorize them into good customers, mediocre customers, and poor customers.
Yeah.
And if you ever do a show like that, I'd like to be part of it. I think it's
Sure.
an interesting topic.
You got some good examples, right? Well, you do have to do that, and those of us who've been in business for very long have many times had to do that. Small businesses are really remiss to let somebody go,
Right.
just because they're afraid to live around town or whatever. And so the way that they are let go is really important as well.
Oh, yeah.
And really, the way that I've always approached that is by in the old days in the retail business, we were pretty harsh. It's just, it's like, hey, look, we haven't been able to satisfy you. You've bought 4 things here, brought them all back, maybe we're just not going to be able to help you anymore. And even Nordstrom's, who is notorious for customer service, did the same thing.
Right.
But you have to be really careful about letting the customer go. And I think that you approach it from the standpoint to say, look, this is what we do. This is the service that we offer. This is how we get paid, or whatever the circumstances are. And 99.5% of our customers like that because we're compatible with them. We don't feel like you're compatible with what we offer, and there's probably somebody else out there that can do a better job for you, than what we can. You have to be kind of careful about how you do that. Or they're on social media and they are just, they have to leave happy. That's not easy to do. So yeah, that's a pretty good subject. It's a tough subject. I'm not sure if I'm the perfect person to do that topic or not, but I think the principles are there. Doing it is a lot harder than talking about doing it. Yeah. And it requires, and I did have, my mentor was really, really good at that. So, I did learn a few things about that. There were times when he very, very nicely would simply, with a smile on his face.
Absolutely.
But then, they'd walk out of the store and they'd realize, I think that I'll do a much better job shopping at, the competitor. And actually, that's what you want, those crappy customers. That's your competitors. That's
absolutely. You want to airmail them there.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Good idea. So.